Sir Eli,
Yes.
as you know, I've been interviewing eminent scholars associated with the faculty to preserve aspects of its history. The name of Lauterpacht is one that has been associated with the faculty for longer than almost any other. 1938 to the present day, exactly 70 years, and its legacy is something of which the faculty is justly proud. The Lauterpacht Centre for International Law, which you established, is a monument to the great contribution Sir Hirsch and yourself have made to international law at Cambridge and worldwide. In these interviews, I hope you will recount memories and anecdotes that define your professional and academic career, and at the same time take the opportunity to recall aspects of your father, Sir Hirsch's life and achievements, as seen from a unique personal perspective. Could we start with your early life and interweave memories and anecdotes about the lives of your father and mother prior to your arrival in Trinity College in the early 50s? Later, we can deal with your academic achievements at Cambridge and your professional activities from the 1950s to the present. Finally, there will be an opportunity to talk about your published work, and at that stage, perhaps we can include more about your father's ideas, because you have produced extensive compilations of Sir Hirsch's manuscripts and papers. So starting then, in the first section, can we deal with the period before you were born? Do you have any memories, Sir Eli, your parents told you of their early lives?
Well, I can tell you about their early lives. Obviously, I have no memories of what transpired before I appeared. But my father was born in a little village called Zholkiev, which is about 25 miles east of a major city in those days called Lemberg. It was the capital of the easternmost province of Austria-Hungary, namely Galicia. And when he was about 10 years old, the family moved from Zholkiev to Lemberg so that he might be better educated. He went to school in Lemberg and remained there from about, I suppose, 1900. He was born in 1897, and he remained there until, I suppose, in Zholkiev until about 1905 or thereabouts. Then he was in Lemberg from 1905 until eventually he went to Vienna in 1919 to pursue research. And there he worked under distinguished international lawyers, Kelsen and Strissover. Even then he became interested in the relationship between domestic law and international law and in the role of the individual. And his particular field of study was the mandate system, which was then emerging from the League of Nations. And in 1922 or thereabouts, he met my mother, who was studying piano in Vienna. She was a gifted pianist, but unfortunately didn't continue it very much after she married my father. But he met my mother, and they got married in Vienna in March 1923. There was a brief interlude when they went to Germany for my father to do further research, and after that, in 1923, they came to England, and they settled in London, where my father attended the London School of Economics. It was there that he met Arnold McNair, who was currently then teaching at LSE, and he and McNair got on very well together. McNair recounts that when my father first appeared in McNair's office in the LSE, my father spoke rather poor English. McNair told him to do something about it, and my father then rigorously attended lectures for 3 weeks and came back speaking English. McNair was quite amazed. And so my father was then enrolled as a research student at the London School of Economics. and he began work on his first book, which was called Private Law Sources and Analogies of Public International Law, and he produced this thesis by 1927, and it was published to much acclaim because it was a novel and interesting work. And on the basis of that, he obtained an assistant lectureship at LSE, and round about then, after having lived in various places in North London, they moved to a rented house in Cricklewood, 103 Warm Lane, and it was there that I was born on the 13th of July 1928. So my father was then, as I say, lecturing at LSE, and he continued with his work there, and between 1928 and 1933 he produced probably his most important and renowned work, The Function of Law in the International Community. And then, on the basis of that work, he was promoted. He became a lecturer and eventually a reader in international law at LSE. In the meantime, McNair had moved on from LSE to Cambridge, where he had become Full Professor of International Law in 1935 after Pierce Higgins retired. And then in 1937, McNair accepted appointment as Vice Chancellor of Liverpool University. And so my father, with McNair's encouragement and support, was appointed to the Whewell Chair here in Cambridge in 1937, and we all moved up from London to Cambridge.
Sir Eli, can you tell me why it was that your father, Sir Hirsch, decided to come to England in the first place?
Well, that's a very good question. I don't have any direct evidence for the answer I'm about to give, but I'm pretty certain it's right. He did not like Poland, because by 1919, Galicia and Lwów had reverted from being a province of the Austro-Hungarian Empire to being part of Poland. And generally he found that the feelings of the people there towards Jewish people were not entirely agreeable. And so I think he had made up his mind, because he was a thinking and perceptive person, that he wanted to make his life outside Poland. So that's why he went to Vienna for research, and why he and my mother came on to England very shortly after they were married. I think he wanted the more liberal and atmosphere of the United Kingdom at that time.
And he chose to come to the LSE. What made him decide on this?
This was because, I'm sure, LSE was really the only place that he could come to where there was any a real prospect for an international lawyer. There was not much going on at the other establishments, University College, King's College, and so on. LSE also had an international law library, the Fry Library, which had been provided with monies from Sir Edward Fry, who'd been Lord Justice of Appeal, and so it had the resources he needed.
I see. I was reading that at the time when they were in London, your mother was quite keen to return to Palestine, but that Lord McNair prevailed upon her not to persuade your father to do this. Do you recall this at all?
Well, I don't have any direct knowledge of it, but of course, as I say, my father and mother continued to live in England, and he was always sympathetic to the Zionist cause, and in due course, in 1948, when he was in New York, he played some role in the drafting of the Declaration of Independence of the emergent Israeli state.
Interesting. So you mentioned, Sir Eli, Lord McNair during this period. Do you have personal recollections of him?
Yes, I do. First of all, of course, he wasn't Lord McNair then. He was Dr. Arnold Duncan McNair. He only became Lord McNair after he ceased to be president of the International Court many years later. But McNair and my father became very close friends, and McNair used to visit the house from time to time. And I remember one occasion, I suppose I must have been about between 3 and 5 years old, and McNair came to tea at our house in Warm Lane, and my mother had bought a nice cake, and it was sitting on the table, and I was very anxious to get a slice of it. So I thought the only way to get into the cake was to offer some to McNair. So I obviously must have said to him something like, "Would you like a piece of cake?" And he smiled and replied, "On y soit qui mal y pense. Shame be he who evil thinks." And but we always had a very good relationship, McNair and I, and as he grew older I saw more of him. But he was a very considerable person.
Sir Eli, your father had his fair share of critics legally, including names like Brierly, Schwarzenberger, Friedman, Carr. Did you ever meet any of these?
Yes, Brierly I have no recollection of having met. Obviously, my father thought highly of him. When Brierly died, my father edited a collection of his articles, which was published under the title The Basis of Obligation in International Law. But I really haven't got much more to say about Brierly, except that he and my father did not have the same views about the fundamentals of international law, though obviously my father admired and respected Brierly. Now, as to Schwarzenberger, that's a rather different story. Schwarzenberger did not come to England until, I suppose it must have been the late 30s as a refugee from Germany. But he came with a burden, I might almost say, of Teutonic philosophy. He was a person who thought that the teacher knew all. He was not a flexible person. He was a very nice man, but as I say, he was not easy to get on with. And for some reason, he decided to have a kind of feud with my father, and they fell out. Well, they didn't fall out because my father wasn't interested in having a feud or falling out with Schwarzenberger. But over the punishment of war criminals and the defense of superior orders. I don't have the details at my fingertips now, but Schwarzenberger and my father did not get on.
Right. Interesting.
I met Schwarzenberger when I myself began lecturing at LSE back in 1951 or 52, and he was always very nice to me, and I had no particular animus against him, nor indeed did my father. It's just that they didn't get on, and my father kept his distance.
Yes. Any recollections of Carr? Carr.
E.H. Carr?
Yes.
Oh no, my own recollection of E.H. Carr is limited to the period in his later life when he was a fellow of Trinity and I was a fellow of Trinity. We have a special fellowship at Trinity for distinguished scholars and provide them with accommodation and living. But I never had any intellectual contact with Carr.
Well, that brings us to your own early life, beginning in 1928 and covering the period from 28 to 1940. Do you have any memories, Sir Eli, of your life while your father was at the London School of Economics? Does anything stand out?
Oh yes, but we had a very nice family life. We lived happily together at 103 Warm Lane. my father used to go off to LSC each day. Initially, he would drop me off at kindergarten, King Alfred School, near Golders Green Station. We would take the tram from Cricklewood to Golders Green, and then walk up the hill to King Alfred School, and then my father would go on to LSC. I suppose my mother must have picked me up from school, but it was a period notable only for the fact that I spent most of my time on the slide at school, and my mother had repeatedly to patch my trousers from being worn out. But it was a happy period. Sometimes on a Sunday my father would take me out for a walk in Hampstead Heath, or the three of us would go on the train out to some place like Aylesbury or Amersham and walk in and picnic in the hills there. My father had made a number of good friends at LSC, and I can't remember exactly who they were, but I know that on one occasion we went out to visit them in the country near Frinton, and certainly as the years went by, we visited Frinton for holidays several times. I remember particularly the period round about, must have been 1934-35, when my father was preparing for his bar examinations, and he rented a house in Frinton. This is Frinton-on-Sea in Essex. He rented a house there, and also one of those little beach huts by the beach. And my mother and I used to go down to the beach hut in the morning, and there I would play with friends that I made on the spot. He remained in the house and got on with the preparation of his bar exams, and then he would come down to the beach round about lunchtime, having stopped off at the local Sainsbury's and got things like ham and tongue and things that we would enjoy for lunch, and we would have lunch together, and then he would go back and do more work.
It sounds delightful.
Oh, it was a nice life, yes. And of course, by then I was growing up. 1935, I was already 7 years old, and was going to school in London, the Hall School, which was in Hampstead. I would get there on the school bus, or it really wasn't a bus, it was just a large motor car that would pick up several of us and take us off to school. And it was a very good school, and I enjoyed it until we came to Cambridge in 1937.
So, do you have any memories of your life in pre-war Cambridge?
Oh yes, pre-war Cambridge was a very nice town, and it was, of course, not as big as it is now. I think the population was then round about 44,000, and it was a safe town. One didn't have the concerns that one has today about letting a young person out on his own. And I cycled round a great deal and became acquainted with the town. I went to school here. We lived in Cranmer Road, which is just off Grange Road, behind or near the University Library and behind where the present law school is. And I went to school just round the corner at King's Choir School, as it was then called. It's now called King's College School, but it was a school that King's had founded many years previously for the education of the choristers of King's, and there were a number of day boys there, and so I went there, and the headmaster at that time was a rather formidable figure, Mr. Fidian, and he didn't stand for any nonsense, and I tended to be slightly undisciplined and talkative, so I came in for my fair share of punishment, but nothing too terrible. I got whacked a few times, but I stayed at King's Choir School from our arrival in Cambridge in 1937 until I was evacuated to America towards the end of 1940.
Right. So, before your evacuation, life in wartime Cambridge. Do you have any recollections of that? From
Well,
1939?
Cranmer Road was a very agreeable road. In those days, the hierarchy of professors was much more highly regarded and respected than it is today. There were fewer professors. I think at that time in the university, the whole of the university, there were only about 42 professors.
Gosh.
So a professor was a quite significant and distinguished person. It had its own special social rules. For example, when somebody came to Cambridge for the first time, like my mother was coming, it was the custom that other ladies would call upon her at tea time. They would come with their visiting cards, with the corner turned down for some reason I don't quite know, and they would come and have a cup of tea with my mother. And my father would work at home. He had a study in the house at number 6 Cranmer Road, but he was not party to these ladies' visits. Cranmer Road had some notable residents. At number 3 there was somebody called Mr. Hutton, who was not really part of the university, but he'd been a former colonial servant. I didn't see anything of him. At number 5, which is now the house where the research centre is, there was a family called Stanley, 2 brothers and 3 sisters, all unmarried. One of the brothers was a solicitor in Cambridge, and they were obviously well off. They had domestic staff, a chauffeur, gardener, and a cook, housekeeper, and so on. And their presence in the road was marked by the daily excursion of the person whom we called Two Stick Stanley. She was a very agreeable lady, as she perambulated from number 5 down to the pillar box just outside number 13. And at number 7 there was a lady whom I didn't really know. I think her name was Miss Macaulay. And so on down the road. And then at number 13 there lived Professor Winfield, who of course was one of the luminaries of the law school, a very nice man, a charming wife and a lovely daughter, and she had, I remember, beautiful Irish setters. And then beyond there was the house where Sir Ernest Barker, well-known professor of political science, lived with his wife and 2 children. Then further down the road, though a bit later in time, there lived Professor Radzinovich, the criminologist. That was on the, so to speak, the left-hand side of the road. And on the right-hand side of the road, next to us at number 4 Cranmer Road, there lived the Regius Professor of Hebrew, Professor Winton Thomas, who had previously been Professor of Hebrew at Durham. He was a very large man. He'd been a rugger player. He and my father were quite friendly. And then at number 8, on the other side of the house of my parents, there lived a former Provost of Kings, and so on down the road. It was, everybody knew each other. And this was in the years, of course, just before the war. Then came the war, and soldiers were billeted in the houses. There were quite a number billeted at number 8. We didn't have any soldiers billeted in our house, but we were required to provide accommodation for students from London School of Economics and other London university establishments who had been evacuated to Cambridge. So our house had 2 young women from LSE.
Right. Gosh, it sounds like an idyllic childhood.
Oh, it was very nice. I was very happy, and as I look back on it, very happy.
Sir Hirsch's Carnegie Endowment for Peace visiting professorship took your family to the United States in 1940. Do you have memories of this translocation, Sir Eli?
Oh, yes, indeed, I have. As you say, my father was invited by the Carnegie Endowment to take a visiting chair. in the United States. He was reluctant to take it up because he didn't want to give the impression that somehow he was fleeing the situation in the UK. But he sought advice from the Foreign Office, and Sir William Malkin, who was then the legal advisor, and others in the Foreign Office urged him to go because they believed that he could do much to turn United States opinion in academic circles in favor of the United Kingdom. There were quite a number of isolationists in the United States at that time, and so they encouraged him to go. And we all went in October 1940. We left. We had tenants who remained in the house in Cranmer Road, teachers at the London School of Economics, and we went off and we sailed to the United States on a liner called the Scythia. It was quite an exciting time. We took the train up to Liverpool, and Liverpool was being bombed regularly at that time, but fortunately on the night that we were on board the boat we were spared bombardment, and we started off. My father kept a rather amusing little diary of the journey, which I will in due course use in the biography of him that I am trying to write.
How fascinating.